I chose to evaluate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s I've Been to the Mountaintop speech, which he delivered to a crowd of striking City of Memphis sanitation workers in April of 1968. The plight of Southern black city workers had been thrust into the national spotlight with the deaths of two black garbage collectors who were crushed by a faulty crushing mechanism in the back of the garbage truck they were working on. This incident and the inequalities between black city workers and their white counterparts working in the same departments had sparked outrage not only in Memphis but nationwide. This would end up being King's last speech, as he was shot and killed less than 24 hours after he delivered it. According to Stanford University's online Martin Luther King Jr. encyclopedia, the speech was delivered on the fly, if you will, as King had not planned on speaking originally that night. But the deaths of the two workers and the aftermath that ensued are what had brought him to Memphis. And those same deaths were weighing heavily on the minds of the people who were gathered there at the Mason Temple to hear him speak that night. So understandably, the tone of the speech was motivational and also persuasive. It was motivational to the striking workers to stay strong in their convictions and to keep doing what they were doing. It was persuasive to the supporters to get involved and stay involved. And really, he was admonishing everyone present to continue on and to see this thing through to its logical end. Now, King knew in order for his words to really reach his audience that he was going to have to connect to them in a personal way. And he did so at the most basic level by speaking slowly enough to be easily understood. Rate of speech is crucial for public speaking success. Speaking too fast leaves your audience scrambling to even hear your message, let alone take it in and process it. Something else that King did to connect with his audience was to show them that he was willing to do the hard things that he was asking them to do. He shared personal experiences of singing hymns in the face of police dogs and fire hoses and arrest threats. Again, to maintain that sense of connection and to illustrate that he too had suffered for his ideals. He shares of being nearly fatally stabbed by someone who opposed his viewpoints. And actually, the attacker's blade stopped millimeters from puncturing King's heart. And he segues that information into another strategy for driving his message home, and that is the effective use of repetitive phrasing. Every time King says that he was glad he had not sneezed that day, what he's saying is he's glad that that blade didn't puncture his heart, because then he wouldn't have been alive for several key workers' rights and civil rights moments that he got to be alive for. Every time he starts telling a new milestone he was glad he missed, he starts out by saying he's glad he didn't sneeze. He's glad he didn't sneeze. He uses this same technique at another point with a different phrase, and according to the recorded audience reaction at the time, it was very effective. They were talking back to him, and it was like the repetition had built up its own energy, and the crowd could just feel that coursing through them as well. Another strategy that makes King's speaking particularly effective is his way of just skimming over slight errors in a way that allows his audience to skim over them too. When he does make an error, he recognizes it with a phrase like "or rather," and then he continues on with his original intended wording. And this is an adequate response in most situations. Some speakers will draw unnecessary attention to an error by going on about it, and audience loss of interest is a real risk at this point when you make too big of a deal out of a slight error. In conclusion, I think that this speech is a shining example of why Dr. Martin Luther King was such a well-respected and sought-after speaker and leader. He could really reach people and inspire them with his words. Whenever he spoke publicly, he did so with respect toward everyone. He didn't step on others to lift himself up, but he reached out his hand to those above him and below him in an effort to try to get everyone on common ground.